You're watching News at Prime. Let's get into a completely different discussion now. Stellenbosch University partnering with the Special Investigating Unit to fight corruption in the country. The agreement expected to focus on areas of training and research, including community engagement and capacity building, particularly when it comes to the exchange of information and expertise. Let's speak about this now with the head of the SIU, Advocate Mothibi, who joins us in studio this evening. A pleasure to have you back, Advocate. It's always good to have you here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Let's talk about this MOU signed with Stellenbosch University. It seeks to find new ways of fighting corruption. Just give us a teaser. What could these strategies be?
No, thank you, Goli, for this opportunity. I like it when you preface it by finding new ways, because we continuously innovate. Because as we always say, the criminals generally also innovate in their own space, and those who are corrupt continue to come up with new ways of doing things. So as government and as law enforcement agencies, anti-corruption authorities, we need to continuously innovate and, if you like, really be ahead of those who perpetrate this incidents. So today, really, part of what we speak about is the partnerships that we need in the fight against corruption. Those partnerships really locate themselves in the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, particularly Pillar 6 of the National Anti-Corruption Strategy, that really says we need to protect vulnerable sectors. Now, by doing so, we also looked at the provisions of the United Nations Conventions Against Corruption, where it particularly says state parties should really include the whole of society and the whole of government in the fight against corruption. Now, in that context, we have sought to initiate a process to come up with the National Corruption Prevention Framework, and within that there are streams. Right now, there's a stream where we're looking to really partner with academic institutions like Stellenbosch. Now, on the 13th of June, we signed the MOU with Stellenbosch University. Now, your question is, how is it that it's really going to, show up all those new ways of doing things? As an example, we are looking to really ensure that we assist government and government institutions in the early detection and early identification of corruption. I mean, everybody would agree that it's better really to prevent, detect early, and mitigate at that time. Because at the moment, we spend the bulk of our time reacting, investigating, prosecuting, recovering monies. In many instances, really, the bulk of our, but if we spend another bulk of our time on the prevention side, we really believe that will make a dent to the corruption. So part of what we're looking at is sharing of information with the Stellenbosch University, and that information could really be on the project research basis in terms of how is it that the modus operandi. By the way, the reactive part gives us a view of how this corruption is perpetrated. Then the systemic recommendations that come out of the investigation feed into the research in terms of really identify how we can build up the controls to mitigate. The other part is really just making sure that we collaborate, around community engagement. Stellenbosch, I think, it does quite a number of that. Research, they've got quite a research capability, so we want to leverage on that, right? In terms of really coming up with initiatives around predictive modeling, for example. I know it's quite a term, but it really says the ability to use the data to model so that you are able to predict in the procurement space the probability of a certain incident happening. We've seen this being done in other corporates. We believe even in the public sector it can be done. So we are going to be, doing that. We've already, have some initiatives. At the moment, most of our investigators are going through learning and development programs with the Stellenbosch University. So we're really at that stage now where we are saying, yes, the reactive side, we need to investigate effectively, consequence management, but let's step up on the prevention side and ensure that we partner with the whole of society so that everyone really can play a role. And academic institutions have got an important role to play. And it's really not necessarily around research and learning and development alone, right? We would like, as SIU, and this is at a higher education, but also at a lower education, we would like to influence the curriculum. Or not, well, influence, yes, but contribute. Get a curriculum that focuses on anti-corruption, right? Education, awareness. Because to a large extent, and we've seen it in other jurisdictions, Koli, that it really, really works. The culture of anti-corruption, look, it's quite a journey, and it really starts, from education and awareness part. So we would like to start contributing in that space.
You've said a mouthful there, Advocate. So I'm not going to ask what the role of institutions, higher education institutions, is going to be, because I think you've explained it in that first answer, that theirs is research and training.
Yes.
That's where they fit into the picture. And that's why you're calling for more of them to come on board.
That's right.
There was an interesting element at the signing of this MOU that came up, and it is how women are affected when corruption takes root.
Yes.
Explain that to us. I don't know if you could use an anecdote of how women are impacted and how then does this get fixed whilst the fight against corruption continues.
No, thanks for that point. The MOU was actually signed as part of the summit that was led by Stellenbosch University School of Public Leadership, right? Yeah. So as part of the summit was really around, the issues of gender and anti-corruption. And now, the issue around, women being affected, I think cannot really be overemphasized. In many instances, I mean, we have also sort of seen it as part of our investigations, that in many instances where corruption affects service provision, right? Those who are invariably in the receiving end is women, because the resources that are required either to provide for kids, either to pay for school fees. So there's other examples that you could roof over the head. Invariably, where a roof over the head is not provided, a woman really goes at length in ensuring that there's that. And I mean, a roof over the head, I'm just using that as an example, is that if it affects, the provision of housing, that invariably you see it in the communities, that it's women that get negatively affected. But the other aspect of the women, before you go further, is the role of women, including women in the fight against corruption, women in law enforcement agencies, and I mean, invariably in the whole value chain, right? Including on the bench, in the high courts, in the magistrates, but particularly where we are, in the law enforcement agencies, so that they are also well equipped to investigate as much as men can investigate.
You're watching News at Prime. I'm in conversation with the head of the SIU, Advocate Mothibi. Advocate, before I ask about these ongoing investigations I flagged just before we went on a break, just to conclude the matter around how women become vulnerable in situations of corruption.
Yes.
I noticed there's a new term called sextortion. In plain language, women being exploited for sex when it comes to these situations. Is that, in plain language, what you seek to try to stem as
yes, that's amongst others what really we seek to stem in taking up, this topic and this subject, of ensuring that women, are on the same plane as men in this whole sector of the anti-corruption. Because we've seen it, as you know, there's extortion, which really means that, you really incapacitate someone in order to gain an advantage, in a way. And then, they just really put a S, before the extortion, which really says, rather than asking for money, you would then ask for, sexual favors, which is it's demonic on its own, So we would really want to stamp out, because it is actually corruption as well, So we would like to stamp that out. But of course, that the environment needs to be conducive, supportive, so that women can feel empowered also to fight corruption and also to speak out. And speaking out, we've seen it in various examples, Transnet example with whistleblowers, and we always emphasize at any platform that speaking out is one thing, but protecting those who speak out is another, right? So we need to make sure that in this journey of ensuring that we contribute to the empowerment of women, we also ensure that there's appropriate protection.
Of whistleblowers.
Of whistleblowers in general, but of course in particular women whistleblowers. Yesterday, in this newsroom, there was a similar interview with Kugen Pile. He's also, part of various institutions. He sits on the board of Stellenbosch University leadership. So this is really picking up on what he was saying yesterday. Yeah. He did pick up on the issue of whistleblowing. This part, Koli, and I want to assure the public that it's really, really receiving the attention that it desires, based on some of the recommendations from our investigations, from the Zondo Commission, because we know that whistleblower activists have really recorded their voice, and we would like to make sure that we respond accordingly.
Let's then transition to some of the cases that are possibly on your radar. Let's talk about the Transnet National Ports Authority. There was the tender there to upgrade the security fencing, and apparently this ballooned from 90 million upwards of 300 million.
Right.
Is the SIU involved in this investigation?
Right, thanks for that question. We've got an ongoing investigation at Transnet, and it has really produced results where various senior executives have been found wanting, and they are being held to account. There's one executive at Transnet, and I can say this because it's public. Msagala is his name. He was involved in wrongdoing, and we ended up seizing various of his cars, various of his houses, and we are continuing to find similar wrongdoing, and we are not going to hesitate in really taking similar actions. Now, on the Port Authority, this has come to us recently, and the team there investigating at Transnet indicated to me that they've received these allegations. Yeah. So we've actually even contacted, I think it's the Transnet CEO, where we are going to be meeting, I think it's next week or week after, where we now indicate to her that these new allegations relating to Ports Authority, we are going to process them, and the team is busy doing that as we speak. Yeah. So literally we are involved, but we are still at an early stage where they are now going through the allegations and looking at that, contractual circumstances, how the contract was entered into, how it was executed, how is it that it ballooned to such lots of money, who was involved, what is it that needs to be done. So the assessment is as follows. We assess and do a finding whether it's within the current proclamation. If so, we move on swiftly. It does happen that the allegations could fall outside of the scope of the proclamation, in which case we have to now, by law, make sure that we process the amendment of the proclamation so that we can investigate. So on the next occasion, we'll probably be able to give you an update on how far we have went with that.
All right.
But it is indeed on our radar screen.
All right. So this would be a fresh investigation for you.
Yes.
At this Transnet National Ports Authority.
Ports, yeah.
Okay. I want then to talk about Umngeni Utugela Water Utility. It's now amalgamated.
Right.
At the time that you started these investigations, it was still called Umngeni Water.
Yes.
Irregular expenditure
Yeah.
was the issue there, worth 2.5 billion. How far advanced are your investigations here?
At last update by the team, because this would be dealt with by the team in the KZN space, in the KZN office. So at last count, the investigation, I think, was relatively complete. And then there were, that is at that time, remember, it dates back, it dates back, well, I can't really recall, how far back it recalls. But
I think based on what I've read,
Yeah.
I picked up November 2023.
Yeah.
So that's how far
That's
back
right. That's how far back it comes
it likely goes.
So as we speak, there are, we reach those outcomes. The finding that has been made is that there has been irregularities, and I think there's been, what you call irregular expenditure. But so the process of really ensuring that the consequence management is meted out is now at the stage, I'm sure I'll have to really check with the team, is at the stage where if there was a contract that was entered to in any way, it's going to be set aside. If there was anyone found wanting, they are also going to be, facing the music, so to speak, and then, of course, referrals to the prosecuting authority.
Final question to you, Advocate Mothibi. These investigations, sometimes they take very long.
Uh-huh.
But with your investigations, I think part of what South Africans are satisfied with the agency that you run,
Yes.
is that yours are quick. And I'm saying this because
Right.
the board chairperson of this Umngeni Utugela Water Utility, Vusi Khuzwayo, at the time of these investigations, was saying that the longer the investigations run in the question of irregular expenditure, the longer the irregularities
Would-
balloon, or
Yes.
the bigger they get. So how is it, what do you do to quicken the process of investigations versus the actual law enforcement? Because as you've, I think, told us before, your investigations are not court ready. You still have to then give them
Right.
to law enforcement where they do their own independent verifications before they can take a case
Right.
to court. Am I correct?
Yeah. Let me put it this way, Goli. I think you've really hit the nail on the head in terms of our execution,
Yeah.
right? We started off with our strategy almost 6 or so 7 years ago. And part of what we identified, Goli, is that at that time when we started, we did a risk assessment and said, colleagues, the issue of taking long to investigate, it's going to have a reputational risk on us, right? So we need to put in place measures to ensure that we execute and execute quickly, right? But it's easy to say that. So we needed to, really spell out the value chain of what is it that we investigate. And I said it before on record that almost 95% of our investigations is procurement-based, right? And clearly, because that's where the money is. Those who are corrupt and want to siphon money, they go into a procurement space. Now, as an example, if there's a procurement allegation that a contract X was awarded irregularly, and then we have to investigate, right? When the investigation kicks off, the team sits in the room and, just spell out, the aspects that needs to be investigated, right? And each one in the team has got a responsibility, right? In terms of you alone or with a team, you look at that process. You look at that process. You look at that process. And we give them timelines. It's project-based. It's project-based. If it's a irregular procurement process, they go and investigate whether the procurement process was followed. They come out with findings, quickly. And then in that process, they say who was involved, right? And then we go and check who was involved. The team or the same team or the other team could then look at the process of referrals to NPA. But the other thing is we have really learned that multidisciplinary teams, lawyers, accountants, forensic investigators have to interact and work together. In that way, you reach a quick result that is actionable.
Advocate Mothibi, I want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's the trick to getting these investigations concluded quickly. I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Sincerely for coming through. Time and again, when we ask for you, you avail yourself.
Thank you.
And
thank you,
I want to thank you sincerely for that.
Thank you.
Advocate Andy Mothibi is the head of the Special Investigating Unit, and that's where we end it for this Monday edition of News at Prime. Up next, Thabo Mdluli is got in focus for you.